Herbert's 100 Harem. His communicator buzzes and he shifts his arm to control both joysticks on the arcade machine, one with the crook of his elbow, the other with his hand. He glances at the screen as he plays. Oh, okay. He notes steering around a sharp turn in the racing game and then glancing around a bit as he accelerates again. 2 Carib, one with shaggy fur, one without, both gray with brown hair. Huge racks of horns, and Shaggy's got little nubs on hers. He mutters as he glances around and then spots them entering. He nods and tucks the communicator away. VIPs located. He begins his passive bodyguard work, glancing towards the couple out of the corner of his eye as they walk through the large arcade and shifting so that if things go wrong, he can race to protect them. "What's wrong?" Neely asks to his left. He's technically racing her, but neither of them are doing more than just hanging out. After more than a few sessions of her hiding in his room to get away from some of the bullying, Herbert had asked Ambassador Halela for advice. It turns out that just telling them all to knock it the hell off is usually enough, as it's considered shameful for things to get to the point that the husband has to reprimand his wives. "Well," Herbert begins as his racing avatar goes into an impressive tailspin as he flubs a turn and crashes and burns in a very literal manner. "Some VIPs showed up. I'm now on passive bodyguard duties, which just means I'll be keeping my eyes open on a couple of people, and if things start going wrong, I swing in like a hero and help them out. Nothing complicated." "Oh," she mutters, the patterns of surprise and excitement painting themselves in the axiom naturally flowing through her head. It had taken him a bit to actually figure out what he was missing, but when he finally saw, he was able to easily tell each of them apart and what they were feeling as well. Axiom really does make the galaxy go around outside of cruel space. Neely, for instance, was actually one of the shyer ones. Of course, with 100 women in a group, you're going to have shy ones. Tomboys, girly girls, proper refined girls, nerdy girls, hard-ass girls, tricky girls, and so many other types. Neely's one of the shy ones, also halfway into girly girl. She's very delicate and signed up for an arranged marriage because she thought she had no chance in hell of ever actually finding her way into a marriage otherwise. Then came the clusterfuck that involved Herbert getting hitched to them all. "So, what's up with them?" Thara, one of his Yao wives, asks. "Huh? These VIPs, what's so important about them?" Thara presses and Herbert just shrugs. "I don't know. I just got orders to help them if things start going wrong. That is the extent of my knowledge." He lies. He recognizes Knifetop. If there's any amount of regression, he won't be protecting her, but protecting others from her, likely starting with the poor girl's mother. "Don Shaw!" someone shouts, and Herbert curses as he turns to regard the clatterhooves. Holly looks terrified and her mother furious. "Crap, I'm on the clock," Herbert remarks before fading out of sight and touch of everything as he sprints to the source of the call. His jacket and pants shed behind him to leave him in only the low-profile armor and the weapons strapped to it. He pulls on the mask and visor from their hiding place as he moves. The cries of alarm from his own brides are distant and behind him as he homes in on the source. Desert Nagasha with demonic face paint, 3 weapons interspaced among her hands, and a jangling collection of Kutha bracelets to functions as totems. Her tail is completely covered by what seems to be a drape, but it's bunched up in a way to suggest armor plating. Her torso is much the same, with her breasts almost angular in their armor. The arms and the head are the only things exposed. He can't afford to take her alive. She turns from her threatening of the clatterhooves and raises her 3 totem-bedecked hands. A torrent energy blasts out at him from her palms to disrupts his cloak and phasing at once while suspending him in the air as he tries to resist the sheer force. Her eyes go wide in shock and she falters for a moment, all the time he needs to get the aim right and gently squeeze his pistol's trigger. The Nagasha hits the ground with the back of her head open for all to see the mutilated chunks inside. "That was a human weapon!" someone in the crowd exclaims in shock as he turns to the clatterhooves. "Activate your distress beacons and get moving. You two need to—" Herbert's command is cut off when his body erupts into goosebumps and he skids sideways to dodge a bolt of plasma from behind. He grabs a small pellet from a bandolier on his left thigh and throws it into the ground to get some cover behind the enormous plume of dark smoke that erupts in response. Shouts from the entrance and the crackling sound of lasers going off to be matched with the bangs of gunfire. He holsters his pistol and runs to the VIPs before being hit with the force of a freight train courtesy of Holly. Ow! He groans as he sits up with a hand on his ribs. They feel broken he's hurt badly from a single panicked punch. "I'm on your side," he gasps out. "Ow! Oh, dear goddess, I'm so sorry. You came at us so fast and it was just reflexes to... Holly's apology is cut off as Herbert focuses the axiom ever so and adjusts his chest with an audible crackling sound and a sigh of relief. It's all right, you just dislocated a couple of ribs, didn't break them. They're back in place, he says before rolling his shoulders. We have a few moments at most. I can get you both out of here and back to friends, but you need to trust me. Are you? You're human, aren't you? Holly asks, and Herbert nods. Yes, now please. We need to go, but I can't do this if you fight me. Herbert almost begs, and both women grab his hands. He channels the axiom through all three of them, and they all fade away. We can't be seen and we can't be touched. We're going straight through and into friendly lines. He explains, then tugs on them to lead them into and through the crowd literally. Panicked faces, concerned appearances, and then a standoff between criminals and a small team of men. He leads them through a wall and then from around a corner waves to one of the men in the back on his communicator. We got freaking ninjas? The soldier asks, and Herbert shrugs. You going to be staying with us? Herbert shakes his head in response. Holly lets out a somewhat hysterical giggle. Do you talk at all? The soldier demands, and Herbert shakes his head again. We have freaking mute ninjas. Let me guess, you were with us the whole time, but ninja, right? Herbert's nod gets the man to twitch. Fine, get going. I'll take these two to safety. Herbert then does a dash behind Holly and vanishes. He can hear the soldier swear in surprise before yelping as Mother Clatterhooves gives him a swat for swearing. Herbert shifts through the wall and into the building before rushing to where he left his wives behind. The mission is the mission, but it's effectively over and he needs to look to his wives. They're just teenagers and are not ready for this kind of madness. That he had to leave them behind makes him feel like a bastard. Neely's holding on to his clothing and looking around in a panic before clearly spotting the axiom bleeding off him and heading his way even as Thara looks around. He fades into view after tucking away his hood and visor, a finger to his lips and a pleading look in his eyes as he walks up to Neely, who gapes at him as she hands him his clothing. Thank you. What is going on? She demands as he slips the loose pants on over his outfit, followed by the jacket. Two women under the protection of the Undaunted were cornered by one of their enemies. I rushed in for a last-second save, but there were a lot more of them. I got them out, but now we need to... This is the police! Everybody on your knees and weapons on the ground! A voice blasting through a speaker outside declares, and the sounds of fighting dies off. Is everything going to be all right? Thara asks as she and the rest of the girls that had come along for this afternoon out gather around him. Should be. Neither I nor any other humans used anything we're not legally allowed to have at all times. Cultural effects, you see. You have a very hard time going anywhere without finding trouble. Neely scolds him and he shrugs. Please, be honest. What's going on? One of them asks. It's Borizi, the one he's known the longest. The one that waited by his bed when he was in a restorative coma. If he owes anyone an explanation, it's her. He glances around to make sure no one can overhear them and guides them all to a secluded table that he checks for bugs before glancing up at the camera and then sitting with his back to it. About 2 weeks ago, an investigation into possible hostility stumbled into an attack from the Umbral organization aimed at what we thought was a possible hostile party. I can't give many more details beyond shenanigans happened, but we were made very aware of the Umbral and started poking our noses in on the branch that opened fire on us. How much a part of this are you? Borizi asks, and he musses up his hair. That bad? I never stopped being a soldier of the Dauntless, or rather the Undaunted now. Aside from the first incident, I've had something to do with most everything afterwards. I can't tell you how due to operational security or much in the way of details, but I can tell you this much and a little more. Herbert admits, and there's nodding all around. How do those two women tie in? They're Carib, right? We rescued one of them when we retaliated against the Umbral. Again, I can't say how, but some rescues were involved. I can't give you names or more details, but I can state that we're taking this very seriously, and after this attack, it's likely they won't be staying on Centris. They're under our protection, and that's not something we're lax on. Did you kill someone? Thara asks quietly. Herbert sits up a little straighter and sighs. Yes. My choice was the heavily armed and armored criminal or her would-be victims. It was an obvious decision. Herbert answers before glancing through the crowds. Most of the police attention is on the body he left behind. Things are soon to get awkward. Is it hard? Borizi asks him quietly. No, and that's what's hard about it. Killing someone's a big thing, but it's so easy. Too easy. In situations like this, with clear-cut, good and bad, I don't think I'm going to lose any sleep. It's awful when you think about it, but that's the truth. I don't know who that Nagasha was. All I know is that she was connected to the Umbral in an awful way. I either gave a slave the peace of death or put down a selfish monster, and in doing so I spared the lives of a wounded child and her mother. So no, this one was not hard. Not at all. You are an apex predator, Borizi says in seeming astonishment. Where did that come from? Herbert asks. I was worried. Some peoples bottle things up and pretend to be okay for the sake of the herd, but others just deal with things with pragmatism. It's usually what separates a prey species from a predator one. Prey peoples, they tend to grow skittish around Zayden and Yaoya, and I've gotten over my hang-ups, even had some fun with them. You're still scared of the purists, Neely protests, and Herbert grins and motions for them to lean in. I'm actually fine with the goofy little purr crabs, but it's funny to pretend not to be. Too good of a joke to stop making. I'll stop pretending to be scared when it stops being funny. Wait, that's how you play with them? Thara demands, and Herbert chuckles. You're so weird. I'm a species from the deepest, darkest place of the least hospitable space in the galaxy. If I wasn't weird, then something weird would be happening. The Bounty Hunters. You're not gonna make it! Scaly taunts Mustard with a nasty grin on his face. Well, aren't you a ray of sunshine? Mustard remarks as the rest of the crew sends up cheers, jeers, and a lot of laughter his way. He had 2 Kutha coins riding on whether he could climb onto the passageway the next level up. The only rule was no axiom, and he was slowly hand-over-handing to the edge in order to climb up to the next level. You're gonna die! Scaly's next taunt is in an accent that only he recognizes, but is apparently funny enough to make him snicker as he says it. I can't die, I'm me. Me! Mustard replies, hanging on by one arm and thumping himself in the chest a few times before reaching up and hand-over-handing things like monkey bars for a few moments. The undersides of the walkways in Nightside had a lot of reinforcing struts on them that made great handholds. The whole group, Scaly included, were armed to the teeth. Not only due to this being a pirate station, but also a bit of a sting operation. Several bounties spotted in the area were for rampant slavers, so each of the men were honey traps as they made a spectacle out of themselves. Mustard reaches the edge of the upper walkway and begins to turn around and swing a bit to the unending calls of fall. Fall! Fall! Courtesy of Scaly, when several arms reach down and grab him even as something is thrown into his face that makes him go limp. Mustard! They shout out, and instantly Axiom flows fast and hard. They arrive on the next level seconds later as they swing up and scan around, only to see a small aircar vanishing around a corner in the distance. We've got a signal. Bike remarks with his communicator out even as Scaly slithers onto the upper level with them. He then receives a message. Oh? And Mustard's still awake. He shook off the poison and is playing possum. It's go time, boys. Air farce, the fish bit. I repeat, the fish bit, Pukey says into his own communicator, and a few moments later an open-top air truck swoops over. They climb into the flatbed and hold on even as Scaly slithers into the cabin. Did we get a look at the getaway vehicle or kidnappers? Air Farce asks, even as he adjusts the screen to track Mustard and then takes off. Afraid not, Pukey remarks. I did, Scaly interrupts. We're all listening, little buddy, Pukey says, and the boy nods. I'm sure I saw fins along at least 2 of the arms. Light green? They might be holed up in the wet works. Scaly explains, and the rest of the crew looks thoughtful. Well, shit, looks like we'll be field testing what Franklin sent us then, Pukey remarks. Maybe, maybe not. They don't seem to have gone too far. Up a few more stories, but otherwise they're still in this part of the station, Air Farce remarks as he taps the screen on the dashboard. He casually weaves around several automated drones that have packages and deliveries, and some of the guys contemplate snatching the smaller ones out of the air. What do you think are in these things? Mr. T asks, and Bike leans out a bit with his communicator. There's a beep and he pulls it back. That was some lingerie. It's heading to a missed crash about 2 blocks and 3 stories away. Bike reads out and Mr. T stares at him. He shrugs. I've been working on my hacking skills. I've put together some nasty programs that get me in easy. Nice, that should come in handy. Pukey congratulates him. It's a similar enough algorithm between the drones and the doors and basic terminals around this station. I'll need to set up new code-breaking algorithms every time we end up somewhere new, but we've got a skeleton key for now. Bike explains. Boss man, I think we may have stalkers. J3 notes, looking backwards as he holds a rifle's sight up to his eye, as Pukey shuffles up, causing the sniper to hand over the sight and point. Green-skinned and finned-looking blonde bimbo on an air bike, Pukey remarks before quickly focusing on his communicator. Species designation BPC 1100-6, Amera. She launches paralytic darts from under her fingernails, and the fins easily channel Axiom hard enough to work as both shields and swords. They're amphibious, and the rest is cultural and religious. Odds she's teamed up with Mustard's new friends? Tang asks as he looks through his own scope. Slim, but not none. Keep your heads on swivels, boys, Pukey remarks. Arrival in 30 seconds, Airfarce remarks, and everyone quickly pulls out their small arms and checks them over. It's an even spread of bangers and ablators, with Pukey pulling out his plasma sword and the hat grinning as he pulls out a rod that extends into a staff with the press of a button. Here we are. Kick some ass. Me and the kid will be ready for a getaway, Airfarce says, and Scaly pulls out a large banger from under his seat with an absolutely manic grin on his face. Tone the psycho down, will ya? Oh, fine, ruin my fun, will ya? Scaly remarks as Airfarce pulls up to a balcony. Mustard 6 meters straight ahead, meaning next room. Bike, get us in, Pukey orders, and the man quickly climbs onto the balcony and begins hacking into the security system. Seconds pass by, and from below the Mera that was spotted earlier rises up on her air bike. Was a stripogram ordered? Is Roth about to get a surprise orgy? Because if so, I want in, she says, and the men slowly turn to look at her. What's going on? Our friend's been kidnapped and we've tracked him here, Pukey answers. And how serious are you about getting him back? The Mera asks, and Pukey activates the plasma sword. Ah, if I talk her down, what will you do? We'll be less angry, but still out for revenge, Pukey answers as Scaly none too subtly aims his banger right at her. What kind of revenge? She asks as more and more weapons turn in her direction. That depends on her, Pukey answers, and the Mera looks over all of them before slowly lowering away and out of sight. We're in, Bike says as he opens the door without a sound. All right, move, people. Assume they know we're coming, Pukey orders, and most of the team rush off the air truck and into the apartment. The first room is mostly clear, some couches for sitting around and a couple of tables with weapon parts on them. There are some thoughts of snagging them, but first things first. Mustard needs rescue. They boot open the next door and rush in weapons ready, only to stall out as they find Mustard surrounded by several knocked-out alien women and aggressively Frenching the only one conscious, the other Mera from earlier. He breaks the lip lock and glances to the guys. What took you so long? He asks, even as the guys quickly check the women and start scanning them for bounties. Some of the locals were chatty and it's just rude to cockblock a bro, Pukey remarks as he glances around. There's a few manacles and ropes and such lying around, as well as a great deal of weapons, including several that will get an idiot chucked out the airlock on this station. Roth! Why didn't you answer your... Oh, wow! The Mera from earlier exclaims, barging in and stopping as she sees Roth in Mustard's arms. Andrea? Roth asks before letting out a soft moan as Mustard's hands wander in the stillness. Aha! We've got pay dirt. This bitch has nearly 2 million on her head for child trafficking. She'll be making up for the annoyance at the kidnapping, Dong remarks as he finishes scanning one of the women. He then immediately pulls out some duct tape and gets to work with it. Wait a minute, Andrea begins before backing down when a small wall of firepower is pointed her way. I'm still trying to figure out how you did this. Not that I'm complaining. Any plan that ends with me being given sweet, sweet love from a sexy tret's a good plan, Roth mutters. We're that good. Now then, Mustard says before kissing Roth again. This has been fun, but it's time for me to go. Although, if you're looking for a better team, here's my number. Bring your cousin. You'd both look good under the sheets. The guys glance at each other at just how flirty the man's being, but decide to put it aside for now as they haul out their prize. The rest of the women are scanned, including Roth, who's openly groped as a distraction from her reading the number that Mustard had tucked into her cleavage, and the intimidated Andrea, but there are no more bounties in this little gang. Come on, Mustard. Time to go, Pukey remarks, and Mustard lets Roth down with a last kiss on the lips before blowing one to Andrea on the way out. He climbs out and takes his place near the tied-up bounty. Airfarce quickly gets them moving. After about a block, Pukey turns to regard him. Mind explaining what all that was about, soldier? Their knockout powder wasn't enough to do more than make my head swim for a bit. They got me on the exhale, and I held my breath to get around it. I was able to get some of it and get the girls with it, but she managed to swat it away when I tried to knock her out after the others. A bit of wrestling, and both of us had our hands occupied. So I improvised, and she really enjoyed it, Mustard explains. She wasn't the only one, the Hat remarks, and there's some snorts and chuckles around the truck. All right, boys, we're coming in for a landing 30 seconds till touchdown, Airfar says over his shoulder, and there are thumbs up all around. Is it always this easy? Scaly asks somewhat curiously. I mean, it was all already done and over with by the time you got in. Is bounty hunting really this easy? Bear in mind that we're all massively trained and overly paranoid soldiers. Our daily PT and weapon drills tie into this, as do our specialities. So it looks easy, but that's because we're more than ready for this level of stuff, Pukey states, and Mustard nods before glancing up. Not to mention we got lucky. If they caught me on the inhale, then there are good odds I'd have been knocked out. And if he was knocked out, then we'd have gotten into a firefight and possibly a hostage situation. You might have had to help fight off that Mara on an air bike. We try not to rely on luck, but unfortunately luck is just something that ties into everything, no matter how much or how little you want it to, Airfarce explains as he lands the truck. All right, boys, get a move on. I need to go park this bitch properly. I thought you loved air cars, Scaly remarks as he slithers out and gets into a defensive position to provide a lookout for the guys as they've been training him. When they don't handle like cans with an engine badly welded on, I love 'em. This one is a piece of shit. Engines, control cab with a flatbed, and that's it. It's a piece of junk. I'll need to get this thing tuned up at the very least if we're going to keep using it. That'll be a side project. Get moving, Pukey orders as they haul off their prize and begin carrying her towards the docked chainbreaker. Yes, sir, Airfarce answers before pulling away to one of their rented parking spots. The Void? A passing Horchka asks in bafflement as she watches them go by while clearly kidnapping someone. She tried kidnapping me, Mustard remarks with a grin, and the Horchka snorts in amusement and walks away laughing. Step on it. The sooner we put this bitch in stasis, the sooner we can get some decent drinks, Pukey declares, and the whole group starts hustling.